Smaranam everyone. Today we have Brother Bro Raam from SSBC Segambut to enlighten us on Vedas and devotion through contemplation. His journey on Vedas started at the age of 16 and he's currently teaching Vedas for young adults.
The first question I have for you, Anand, is can anyone chant the Veda or only specific people must chant it? Are there any prerequisites?
Basically, this is a very good question and it's actually a very relevant one in today's times as well. And interestingly, Swami has given the answer, the exact answer for this question back in 2006, in 9th of August during the proceedings of the Athirudra Mahayajna, which was conducted in Puttaparthi. And in that discourse, Swami tells it very clearly that the Vedas are a gift from divinity, from the divine. The Vedas is a gift from the divine for the humanity. And Swami also says that there is no distinction that anyone and everyone can actually learn Vedas, and that is Swami's wish. And Swami says that regardless of your nationality, caste, creed, etc., there is no the Vedas does not belong to any particular community, and that anyone and everyone should learn Vedas. And interestingly, when Swami said this during his discourse, at that very moment Swami actually paused, he stopped his discourse, and Swami actually selected two students from the crowd. There were a lot of students sitting, and Swami called out two students, and they were actually American students who were studying in Swami's institute. And Swami, then and there, Swami called them up to the dais, and Swami made them chant Shri Suktam. So not only Swami told it in very layman terms, Swami also showed it to all the devotees, and also it has been recorded, and that to tell us the universality of this Vedam chant, that it is infinite in nature, and you cannot put any finite boundaries to Vedam and say that it belongs to a particular location, community, or caste. There is no such thing, and it is something that all of us should learn.
That was a very insightful answer, Anna. So I'll move on to the next question. So how can you explain to us on how Vedic chants are beneficial even when we don't know the meaning of every word?
Yes, sure. So Swami has explained in one of his discourses, I think back in 1960s, during the Upanayam ceremony, Swami says that the sounds of the Vedas are as powerful as the meaning of the mantras or the Vedas as well. So, and Swami goes on to give an analogy where Swami says that when a mother puts a child to sleep, a mother will sing a lullaby. And in that scenario, typically neither the mom nor the child will know, or they won't understand the meaning of the lullaby. But because the lullaby is sung in such a manner that it is able to still induce sleep in the baby. So likewise, Vedam chantings as well, it works in a similar manner where the sounds, it has its own energy, and it is able to generate some positive vibrations which will then benefit those who are either chanting or listening to them. So if you don't know the meaning, that should not deter you from chanting Vedam, because the sounds of the Vedic chants in itself is very potent and very powerful. It will definitely give you, it will definitely have some benefits with you. But that being said, we should not just be complacent in that mode. We should also still progress and then carry on to actually investigate and inquire on the meanings of the Vedas, because there's so much that we have to learn from the meanings as well. But Swami says that in the beginning, just because you don't know the meaning of the mantra or the Vedic chant, it should not stop you from chanting, because the sounds of the Vedam chant of that Vedic chant is actually very powerful, and those who are chanting, or even if you don't know how to chant, even if you are just going to sit in the vicinity of the Vedam chanting, if you are just going to sit there and listen, you will still reap some benefits out of it. So this is all based on the power and the principle of the power of sound that emanates from the Vedic chant.
Sounds are as powerful as words. That is something I did not know. Wow. So, Nat, the third question I have for you is, can we attract adverse effect if we mispronounce the word while chanting Veda?
Okay, so Yeah, that's a very relevant question. You see, first of all, before I get into answering that question, we'll just give you a background, right? So Vedas in itself are infinite in nature, and given the nature of Vedas as such, and given my knowledge is so limited on Vedas, so I will not be able to tell you for sure if there will be any negative benefits or not. But having said that, what is more important is the intention that you have when you chant Vedas. So if you have the right intention and if you chant it sincerely, then any mistakes that you make while you are chanting the Vedas, it will not bring any harm to you because your intentions are pure. That is number one. Number two is that we also have a chant which is dedicated, a dedicated chant where you can actually ask for forgiveness from Swami himself if you have knowingly or unknowingly made any mistakes with regards to the pronunciation or intonation or even the speed of the chanting, right? So that chant is known as the Kshama Prarthana. And there is a particular line which says, I'm just quoting that line for example, Visarga bindu matrani pada pada ksharani cha, right? And then we also ask for Kshamasva Saishwara. This is one, that means we are asking for Swami for forgiveness. So that chant, what we typically do is at the end of the Vedam chanting session, we will actually chant the Kshama Prarthana to seek for forgiveness from Swami himself for any mistakes that we have done with regards to the pronunciation or intonation. So once we have asked from Swami for forgiveness, Swami is there to always grant us and protect us. So the fear of having any adverse effects as a result of distorting the sounds of the Vedam, that should not stop you from learning or even progressing in your current Vedam chanting journey. Because if you have the right intention and coupled with Kshama Prarthana, there is no way that you may experience any negative effects as a result of mispronunciation of the Vedic syllables.
Could you please elaborate on how Vedic chants or Vedas are helpful to students?
Yes, sure. So, Vedam chants, especially when they get into the process of learning and then chanting Vedam, it is actually very beneficial for students especially. And this is because you will develop two very important skills that are very helpful for students or basically anyone who is still pursuing their academics. So basically, when you chant Vedam, you have to pay very high attention to the sounds of the Vedic chants. So pronunciation must be perfect, the intonation must be perfect, and all this requires very high level of concentration. And not only that, the other thing, in order to get to that level of perfect pronunciation and intonation, you first of all have to have very sensitive listening skills. Your listening skills must be very intense and very good. And why you should have good listening skills is because, like I said, in order to gain maximum benefit from Vedam chanting, you have to chant it perfectly. So perfect chanting perfectly means getting the pronunciation and the intonation correct. So you must be able to know the different intonations and the different pronunciation. And you must develop that sensitivity to those sounds. And that means that would require you to have very intense listening skills. And these two, listening skills, very sharp and intense listening skills, and also high level of concentration on while when you are chanting or learning the Vedam chant. These two things come in very handy for students, especially when they are studying. Right, or when you're in your classroom, or when you're having your online lectures, right? These two traits enable you to study smartly. They say study smart and don't study hard, right? That means what? That means you only listen once and you have it all in the back of your mind. You don't have to struggle, because of that intense listening and that high grade of concentration that you have. You just have to listen to that lecture or that lesson once, or you just have to read that that notes of yours once or twice, and you have that retained in your memory for a very long period of time. So that is a very efficient way of studying, and that skill you will have to develop it when you are chanting Vedam, because one way of learning Vedam is you will have to listen to the chant continuously. And as you listen, you have to know the basic the intonation. For an instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say we have this line called Ya Evam Veda, and then we also have Ya Evam Veda. See, these two lines they have the same words in it only, but you see how the intonation changes. So if you are not listening attentively, or if you are not concentrating on the Vedam chant, you will miss these very small details with regards to intonation, and you may mispronounce it then if you mispronounce it, then you may not reap the benefit of chanting the Vedam. So if you were to embark on the journey of chanting Vedam perfectly, you will naturally, over time, you will develop this trait of very high level of concentration and very good and intense listening skills. And this is what students are supposed to have. That is why we pray to Ganesha, right? To have a small mouth, and the big ears is to encourage us to listen more. So then Vedam chanting comes in, it falls, it very perfectly, it comes in a place where the students, it gives you these traits where students then will be able to use these skills and traits in their day-to-day studies, and it will benefit them a lot. Personally, I have benefited a lot from this.
As a student, I find that very helpful. I really hope I can use this in my daily life. So, Nev, the final question, how can we chant Vedas to make it a form of Smaranam, devotion to contemplation or remembrance?
Yes. So, Smaranam, right? When we say Smaranam, basically, concentration, contemplation, remembering, and these are basically the terms that we can relate to when we say Smaranam. So, like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to Vedam chanting, it requires you to have a very high grade of concentration. So that in order for you not to distort the sounds of the Vedas. So that is in the very beginning level, when you are just beginning to learn the Vedam chants, then you will actually start intensely concentrating on the sounds of the Vedas. But that is one form of Smaranam. And then when you progress, as you progress in your Vedam learning, then you start discovering the meaning, or you start learning on the meanings of the Vedas. Then it now becomes a form of contemplation, or even possibly visualization, because there are some Vedam chants which that propitiates a certain deity. Okay, for an example, we have Ganapati Atharva Shirsham, and at the end part of Ganapati Atharva Shirsham, there is this part which goes that Ekadantam Chadurhastam Pashamankushadharinam. So it describes the form of Lord Ganesha. So when you have learnt the meanings, then when you chant this particular line, then you start visualizing the form of Ganesha. Ekadantam Chaturhastam, the one with the curved trunk and 4 hands. Pashamankushadharinam, the one who holds the pasha and ankusha. You progress to a form of visualization of the deity, which is propitiated in the Vedam chant. So hence this Smaranam is very inherently embedded in Vedam chanting, because at the very beginning stage itself you have to concentrate on the sound. You cannot have a wavering mind, because you will get the intonation or the pronunciation wrong. Especially when you have very lengthy Vedam chants, you need to have that 100% focus. So that is a form of Smaranam. And then when you learn the meanings, then you actually meditate on the meaning. Or if that particular Vedam chant is, if it's worshipping a particular deity, then you actually, while you're chanting that Vedam, you start visualizing that deity in your mind's eye. So these are all as you progress in Vedam chanting, you very naturally you will actually engage in the act of Smaranam. And eventually Swami says, right, the purpose of learning Vedas is finally, what is required by Swami is to put the teachings of Vedas into practice. And you can only translate them into actions if you have that well established in your mind. So, hence, to answer your question, Vedam chanting becomes a form of Smaranam when you focus on the chant very intensely with 100% concentration, and also when you start learning the meanings, and then you start meditating or contemplating or even visualizing on the meanings of the Vedam chants.
Wow, that was a very insightful session we had. So today we learned that when one begins the journey in learning Vedas, we should know that Vedas are universal and sound is just as powerful as the meaning of the words, so we need not fear to make mistakes while we recite our Vedas. And finally, we can also develop listening skills and concentration skills. Through this journey we embark on, we can become closer to Swami through Smaranam. So thank you so much to Brother Rudra Raam for joining us today. Thank you and Jai Sai Ram.